we are getting close to the holiday season, had a little bit of Alekhine devastation for you, where we got the cream of the crop tribute to the legend Macho Man Randy Savage. So let's go ahead without further ado and jump in to this bullet game that I played against a 2600, and it'll just go to show you that you can win games very quickly in the Alekhine if you know what you're doing. And both of the lines that we're going to take a look at today pop up in my course on Chessable on the Alekhine defense, The Dark Knight Rises. So here, by far the most common move is knight takes e5, and I learned not to pre-move because he goes d takes e5. The pre-move would typically be c6 there, but we can play more aggressively against this d takes e5 sideline. The pawn's going to be a bit weak in a lot of variations, so you want to play in the most aggressive manner possible. Knight c6, already keeping an eye on that extended e-pawn. We'd love to follow up with bishop g4 to undermine the control that white has on that e5 square, defending it. So here, white, without missing a beat, goes c4, and we have the option. Want you to think in terms of aggression with each move. What is the more aggressive option? Because typically that's going to be the better way to go. And in this case, knight d to b4 is going to be best. My opponent trades queens. I want to keep my pieces active. I don't want to take with a knight. Go, well, what about castling? No going backwards here. King takes, as I'm already threatening the big fork. So knight a3 to defend. So natural development, take away some more squares from the opponent. In the past, thought about moves like bishop g4, maybe to undermine the knight, but here, I want to control these key squares. Bishop f5, and after bishop e3, e6, getting ready to get my other bishop out. Castle, queenside check. Let's go for the safer of the two options, king e8 versus king c8. King c8 is superior. You don't have to worry about any knight b5 nonsense here. And my opponent goes bishop e2. So, I was familiar with this position. This entire game, in fact, only took a few seconds. What would you do here with black? If you're a pause your video type of person, here is that moment to find the devastation. Well, we like free pawns. That's a good place to start. Grab that one. And the king doesn't exactly have many options here now, does he? King d2. And again, we ask, what is the most forcing move? Checkmate. All right, let's go to game two. And this one was a blitz game against a 2300 rated player. And this is another frequently occurring position that I get. Here there are a few branches, and the cutest of which, many years ago, gave me a lot of problems. But this position actually scores better for black than it does for white. It may optically look unappealing, but it's awesome. Fully covered in the course. Absolutely. But d4 is by far the most common move that I face here. And they're just hoping to get back to a classical French defense. Well, the main issue with the French defense is the bad bishop on c8. So I want to try to avoid that theme if possible. So what's something that we need to do? c5. I'm going to go ahead and do that natural break to try to undermine the center. As we saw in the last example, the e-pawn became weak. Maybe we can get the same theme here, starting to hopefully see some overlap in the Alekhine to play against that extension when they play e5. So after c5, my opponent plays knight takes d5. Again, we can ask what is the most forcing move. C takes d4, checks, captures, threats, as there was no reasonable checks in the position. Now we look at captures, and queen takes d4. So it seems like, oh, I can just play knight c6, grab the pawn back on e5, and black's not worse. We have better here. What's most forcing? So if you've never seen this position before, you may want to calculate a little bit, but you can pretty much figure out the rest of the game if you take your time here. So the queen is in an awkward spot on d4 with the knight on d5. So let's exert a little bit of pressure there. Knight b6. It's going to be hard for white to do much. This moves like c4 are going to be met by e6, exploiting the pin. So white tries the most forcing move, bishop b5 check, and we should, in response, think of what's going to be best here. We've got 3 reasonable blocks, but I want to maintain the tension of this pin. So the only real option is knight c6. c4 is played to defend that knight. So okay, let's add more pressure, e6. Then I was expecting a move like bishop g5. Bishop g5 seems quite interesting, because if I take the time to grab the bishop, then I am likely in a world of pain there after knight c7, king e7, queen d6. That looks like checkmate. From the very, very worst case scenario, he can grab your rook. But my opponent played bishop f4. That looks like a free piece now. Let's grab it. And after castles, bishop e6. When you're up material, simplify the win. Be happy for him to take on d5. And let's just trade everything. I'm up a piece. Should be an easy cleanup. My opponent goes c5. And after knight d7, very hard to hold everything together. Got so many good options here. Takes, plays b4, but I am just undermining the chain. And my opponent had enough and resigned. So hopefully you enjoyed this quick video looking at Alekhine defense games where my opponents fell into opening traps. But again, I don't recommend playing to win games quickly on the traps. I recommend using fundamentals and being aware of how to exploit common mistakes in your openings from your opponent. And yeah, that's going to do it for this one. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.